Welcome to Power Up Your Practice, the go-to podcast for law firm owners and managing attorneys working on the business, not in it. I'm Ruby Powers, your guide into the heart of law practice management, bringing you insights from leading legal minds, trailblazing attorneys, and expert guests who provide you with an actionable perspective on running your firm more effectively and efficiently. Prepare to open your mind, be inspired, and power up your practice to the next level. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Power Up Your Practice. My name is Ruby Powers, your companion through the evolving landscape of law practice management. In each episode, we get to hear from our guests about their superpowers, their life stories, their perspectives on reaching success. And so today, I'm really excited to have my friend, Jeff O'Brien, with the owner of O'Brien Immigration Law Firm, and he's also the co-founder and executive director of Mobile Pathways nonprofit. And we met a couple of years ago, I guess it already, at the ABA Tech Show. We both happen to be immigration attorneys, but we generally talk about technology, the future practice of law, and asylum, and all of the above. So, and then he roped me into being on the board of his nonprofit. So, fun times. So Jeff, thank you so much for joining. Why don't you let us know a little bit more about yourself?
Thanks. Great to be here. Well, I started practicing law about 15 years ago when I decided that probably everything else I would do would be for someone else. And I wasn't content with that. I wanted to, rise or fall on my own skill set, which meant, taking a risk and starting my own practice. So I started, I hung my own shingle in here. I'm located in Berkeley, next to San Francisco, in 2009. And I've been practicing ever since. My law office now has about 22 employees, so we've grown quite a bit. And then, as Ruby mentioned, I am the executive director of a nonprofit called Mobile Pathways, where we build out technology for small law firms, for other nonprofits that they wouldn't otherwise be able to build because of the cost and kind of the expertise of that. So, yeah, that's those are my day jobs.
Yeah, so you have two big jobs, right? Running a law firm and running a nonprofit.
Yeah, but they overlap to the extent that I practice immigration law, and the nonprofit is focused on finding technology, building technology for immigration practitioners or for immigration nonprofits. And so, in reality, the law practice is I call it kind of like research and development for the nonprofit. And the nonprofit does things that we wouldn't be able to do here because of the cost. So it's a symbiotic relationship between the two, for sure.
That's awesome. I've definitely heard that about entrepreneurs and business owners, to find synergies and symbiotic relationships between their different ventures and business and entities. And you definitely seem to be a great example of doing that. So you love technology. We've had conversations, and you're like wanting to build out some solution to something. And I don't really find a lot of attorneys in general, business law firm owners in general, who really like doing that. But what is sort of like your take on how to run your law firm? Like, what you seem to leverage technology a lot. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing that I do, that I always encourage other lawyers to do, or anyone for that matter, is to assume, like, if you want to build technology or engage with it somehow, develop it, the first step is to think about what the ultimate goal is you would like to do. Like, forget about what you think is possible. But what would you like to do in a perfect world, right? So you kind of first get rid of all the constraints about what your expectations are. And so for me, that is to, first of all, to be able to build it myself. Like, I don't want to go back and forth with a developer, telling them every time I want to make an update. I want to be able to understand the technology myself. So that was the step 2, which is get into a technology that you can develop on your own, that you don't need necessarily an expert to help you with. So I started building things on a platform called Salesforce. And one of the reasons is because you can connect so many different things to it. So it's kind of like an iPhone where you have like tens of thousands of apps you can download and make it customized. The same thing is true with Salesforce, where you can add apps to it and customize your experience to build what you want. And once I started getting into it, then I realized actually this is much more complex than I have the skill set for. And so in that step, what I did is I decided to invest in my own education. So almost like how someone would pay to go to law school, I paid for people to come and train me on the technology. So they would come in my office and we would whiteboard things out. And I knew that the possibilities were there with the technology I was using, but I just needed to understand how to do it myself. And so I had every week, a couple times a week for about a year and a half, I had people, a couple of guys usually came down and we went through, what do I want to see? What do I want to build? And that's when I was allowed to just say, okay, actually, I want to build X, Y, and Z. And they said, okay, now let's whiteboard that out. Let's figure out how to build it. And so over the course of that year and a half, I became educated in a lot of the aspects of technology to then take it and then build it out on my own. So, keeping with that theme, I would say that if you do have a personality like that, where you do want to have control over your technology, then look for an option, look for a system that you can manipulate on your own and that you're not beholden to someone else or a company that says you have to do this with that. Look for something that is like an app, like an iPhone, where you can customize.
Would you describe it as like a low code, no code sort of environment in a way?
For sure, I would describe it as that. And that's one of the reasons why I was able to get into it, because I don't have a coding background and I didn't want to learn coding. It's much too complex for me. It's much too mundane and I would lose interest for sure. And one of the benefits of the platform I was using is that it's a large platform, and that was their goal. Their goal is to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. And that has reaped a lot of rewards for the company, because you have people like myself with no tech background at all. I studied philosophy in college. Could be further but they made it accessible to us through a lot of different avenues. And so I knew it was almost like going into immigration law. As long as I knew that the support system was there, that I could count on, for example, in immigration, I knew that there were other lawyers who could help me. I knew that there was a lot of mentors available. As long as the same thing was true for my tech and my tech stack, then I was comfortable going into that, even though I didn't have a background.
Yeah. And so I've had lots of conversations with people trying to find that best case management program, or like, do I buy this? Which one is it? Which one should I get? Or do I build it? And you sort of like built it with like an existing platform and then integrated other programs and sort of like put together what your needs were. Would you say that's sort of accurate?
Yes, for sure. So Salesforce, as the name suggests, is not built for immigration lawyers. It's not even built for lawyers. It's built for industries that rely on sales teams to go and acquire customers and then to bring them in. But over the years, they've developed so that a ton of industries, regardless of whether they're just involved in sales, can use it and adapt it to their needs. One of the lowest kind of goals of Salesforce, I believe, is to bring on attorneys, because our needs are so specific. So they've never really tried to reach out to the legal community to build on their platform, but some firms have. And maybe some firms are happy with it, maybe not. But at the end of the day, you're taking your destiny, into your own hands if you go down a route like that, because the potential is basically unlimited from what we're used to. But on the other hand, it does take time. As I mentioned, I spent a year and a half understanding how the system works. and patience and sometimes money. So you have to have the right constitution to go to something like that.
So, I mean, not everybody listening is an immigration attorney, but I think this can still be applicable. Some of the things I've seen you to be able to do is you have a dashboard that tells you like how long things are taking, who's working on what, how many cases, where it is in the I mean, your dashboard seems you could sort of figure out any number, it seems like, really easily, from the way you built it out. And then also you have a lot of document assembly and drafting with templates that you built out the most common templates. And so it's quite impressive. And I guess, like, sort of going to what you started off with is imagine what your ideal scenario you would want, not making excuses of like how come you can't get it, and then try to build for it. So kudos for you for figuring that out.
Well, it has taken a long time, and like being a lawyer, I think it's something that has to evolve and to grow, and you need to maintain it. So the system, like law, the technology changes, and you have to keep up to it. So in other words, you have to anticipate for the long run, and you have to realize that, like for instance in California, you have to maintain CLEs to maintain your license. The same thing would be true of this technology. You have to continue to educate yourself on what it's doing, because they retire certain aspects and then they bring new ones in that may be more complex or different. And so you have to be in it for the long run, I would say.
So one of the things I read about you is that you wanted to leverage the technology so that you could keep your costs low for like asylum seekers. And do you feel like you've been able to accomplish that goal, like in your private practice, like being able to reduce costs because you could automate and leverage technology and sort of bridge that gap with the access to justice?
I definitely feel that way. The reason I feel that way is because we do have clients come from other law firms, and sometimes they just give us a stack of all their papers. And I'm always interested in seeing what the other contracts are. And we are frequently half the cost, sometimes more. Sometimes firms charge 3 times what we do. And I feel like our work is quality as well. We put a lot of energy into every single case, whereas I don't see a lot of other firms necessarily attempting the same levels of quality. And because it's hard, our firm deals with a lot of refugees from around the world who don't have huge retainers. And so you have to keep your costs down as much as you can. You have to be flexible with people. You have to look for efficiencies. And because, technology is the easiest way to find those efficiencies, because again, going back to the premise that if you can think it's already been built, like someone has already done it. So, if you can think of something like, for example, like you mentioned, that the document generation, like one of the tools the apps I integrated early on was one that allows me to create as many templates as I want for documents and then integrate that with the customer data. So in law, especially immigration law, there's a lot of routine forms, but there's a lot of details, like, who's creating the document, when they're creating the document. You're creating lots of individual data points on documents themselves, and none of them should be incorrect ever. Like when you submit something to the court, you need to know there's probably, anytime you're submitting a document to the court, there's probably about 50 data points that you have to make sure are correct. With a document generation tool, you can make sure that those 50 are all correct, as long as your underlying data is correct. So you're not worried about those. And those kind of things become invaluable when you're creating lots. When each day you're creating, 20 different filings, and you don't have to worry about, did I make sure that every single, it's called like an alien registration number, is correct? Make sure every judge is correct. Make sure every detail about the case is correct. Because if the underlying data is correct, then the technology is not going to misrepresent that data.
So before we move over to mobile pathways and how you got there, one other thing I've noticed about your way you've been able to manage your firm is that you're able to leverage the technology as well in sort of minimizing meetings and case statuses and like other administrative like management type of processes that some firms have, just because you can see so much data on your dashboard. But I mean, do you feel like that's sort of how you've been able to you increase efficiencies as well in the management?
Yeah, 100%. So one of the things that I think I don't hear a lot of lawyers talk about with their case management systems is the ability for the system itself to capture data passively, right? So there's always people who, will be entering data.
Hmm.
Hopefully it's good data. That's number one. But there's
Right.
also a lot of passive data that's happening in the background. So what I mean by that is like, okay, when you're doing something important in the system, it's making note of that. And it's creating what are called records, basically, telling me what's going on. So if someone is logging mail, if someone is making a phone call, if someone is sending an email, if someone is creating a draft document, all that is creating passive data that is now collectible, and I can now see it. So I can basically create reports or dashboards like you mentioned that can visualize exactly the activity of someone without having them have to report it to me. And of course, that's what a lot of meetings are about. Like, what are you doing? What are you working on?
Yeah.
That type of thing. It's like, well, if you develop your system to capture that data, you don't really need a lot of those kind of routine meetings.
Right. And like having good project management tools or good case management software that can capture all of that data, because I think you're right. A lot of that isn't captured. And so it sort of necessitates meetings, which are not generally fun and the best use of time. So,
Yeah, and oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna bring it back to the system we're using, Salesforce. So the technology, is built, as I mentioned, alluded to earlier. It's built for salespeople, and their goal is to connect with customers, and so they need to. At the end of the day, they're providing a service like we are. Like lawyers are providing services as well. We're all part of the service industry, right? And so a lot of the tools that they use are actually going to be adaptable for any service in the service industry, including lawyers. And so key to a salesperson's job is to be able to understand when was the last contact with someone, right? That's important. When was what did they say? What are the next steps, right? These are also things that we have to do on a daily basis in a law firm as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So and so many so we have a lot in common with professional service industry businesses, law firms do, and all of those points of contact. So I can see why that makes sense for using Salesforce. So tell us briefly about like how you got into starting a nonprofit, like in all your spare time. Yeah.
So I think I call it an epiphany came kind of when I was kind of understanding that the tools that I was using are scalable, right? So scalable is step one. Like if you want to serve a lot of people, which I do, I'm much more of someone who wants to serve as many people as possible well, rather than just a smaller group. That's just my personality. And so a couple of things. Number one, the platform I was using allows for the creation of customer portals. So basically, in Mobile Pathways, the nonprofit, we could create something once and then allow other people to access that. So then the next thing I had to consider, well, what about, if we could do that, then we could build certain technology and say, hey, everyone can access. And I think the first kind of inspiration I had was through text messaging, right? So it's much easier to tell 1,000 people something specific about their case through a text message than to call 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, okay, well, if my law firm can do that, then why don't I bring that to other law firms or other nonprofits? I don't really see myself or in the immigration space as competing as maybe in some other areas of the law, but And then so the next step was, well, how do you pay for this? And there's a couple problems. Tech is very expensive, especially when you want to do something on scale. And so the first thing I thought was, well, the platform I'm using probably would give that to us for free, because they don't really see us as, going back to, they don't really see us as potential customers. We're not really in their zone of interest. And then building it out, like I bet we could get a lot of support for that, a lot of financing to build it out if it's a nonprofit. And so I discovered, the people that I'm most interested in helping again are refugees, asylum seekers. People don't identify that as a lucrative area of law, and there's not a lot of technology built out for that area. And so it's kind of wide open. Does someone want to help? Does someone want to build something? And if you do, then there's a lot of people who want to support that.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. And being able to build out like dashboards that provides information to nonprofits and attorneys to give them the information that will help them better represent their clients. And they've been able to do a lot of things. And Mobile Pathways is only, what is that, like 6 years old now or something like that, almost?
Yeah, about 6 years. Yeah, probably about 4 years. We actually started getting some decent money to build some fun things.
Yeah, and it also, a lot of it came out of the family separation time,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the summer of 2000, that was 18, right?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
There was a lot of, like immigration, like most topics in immigration, they're very controversial. So that was the controversy going on at the time. Of course, now there's the border crisis, but there never seems to be a stop of people who have opinions, very strong opinions about immigration law. So,
yeah. Well, and I think what's great, because you and I both do a lot of asylum, and you're right, that's not the most lucrative area of immigration or any area of law, and to be able to, and a lot of their clientele are not very tech savvy, but trying to find ways to interface with tech to reduce labor costs, to be able to help represent them. I think that's a special challenge, but every way that we can find ways to do that, I think that's a win for due process and getting them closer to a better life and here in the United States. So and just doing our job as attorneys and using our experience as business owners and in technology or whatever other sphere of expertise we have. Well, so great job on that. And I know that takes a lot of your time. Well, what are some of the other things that you think of in terms of the future of the practice, especially with AI? Because I know you and I talk a lot, ABA Tech Show, other tech summits. Like where do you have any predictions about where the practice of law is going?
yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about AI, and probably like most people, they really started to get into high gear a year ago this time. So in 2023, beginning of 2023, when you started seeing ChatGPT come out, and of course, in the last year, a lot of programs coming out using LLMs for law firms, or even just LLMs that weren't for law firms that lawyers could use to help with their daily work. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of interesting things going on, but one of the things that I think we as practitioners, or at least I haven't heard a lot of practitioners talk about, is kind of what's the next phase, like where are we now, and what happens next. And I feel like we're in the let's just like celebrate now with all these new toys we have. Right. So I love them just as much as the next guy. So I use ChatGPT on a daily basis, many times. I use another tool called perplexity.ai multiple times a day. There's a couple I have in that I'm exploring that I will be using soon. One from Google. I'm sure you've heard of Gemini, and then another one from Slack, and Slack because we use a lot of, we have a ton of data over there for our firm. And so I think that these LLMs are helpful in a lot of ways. And if I were to think of where we are now and where we're going in the future, I think that you can kind of break a law office down into kind of its elemental components to figure out what LLMs can do for us and what they're not yet equipped to do. And so if I look at what the kind of the components of a law firm, I see it in kind of like 3 or 4 different areas. And one I see is like customer service. Like, we're providing a value to our client for a service. And that can also include like client acquisition, customer service, retention. We need those skills, those customer service skills, to bring people to us and to keep them happy. And then you have another aspect is case assessment and strategy. So this is kind of where the heart of where a lawyer starts using their technical skills. So background of what's going on, what's your background? Is there a case here? And then the next aspect of a law firm or a lawyer's day is to the creation of documents or publishing things. So this is where like research and writing would come in, where you create a document, whether a draft or a final production of document, and for the court, for your client, for the opposing party. And then the final aspect is trial. So I do trial work, not all lawyers do. So I say that's kind of like maybe yes, maybe no. But the LLMs are capable at helping us primarily today with the second and third one. So the case assessment and strategy and the creation of documents. And I think that's where we're all celebrating right now. We're having and we're trying to figure out the future for that as well, because we're at the beginning of it. But I think that for me, what's even more interesting than that is the customer service part of the law practice, which I think in the future is going to become more important, because the technology is going to be so good at case assessment and strategy and creation of documentation that we will need fewer lawyers to do that.
Yeah.
So
I agree. And I said that at a speech I had last Friday, and one of the law students disagreed with me. And then well, anyway, I explained a little bit more, but I completely agree about how the importance of sort of upskilling and retooling ourselves and finding where our best need and value is. I mean, we have computers now, so we don't have to like dictate things anymore. And, we have, I don't know, we can email things, or don't have to mail things. Like, why not use the tools we have? And then if by doing so, we're more efficient, then it also helps us reinvent the whole concept of how we can better service our client. But anyway, go ahead. I agree with you. I think some people disagree, so that's why I find it fascinating.
Oh, no. Well, I think that several years ago, many people kind of scoffed at the idea that we'd be where we are today with things like these large language models. You'll hear a lot of the CEOs or directors or presidents of these companies talk about how it wasn't very long ago where people kind of rolled their eyes if they thought that we'd be closer to artificial general intelligence. And a lot of people are curious whether we're how far we are from that. But just to give you a background of my own thoughts on that is that I'm convinced that we are very close, within some years. I've heard other people talk about it, 2 years to 6 years, about this AGI, artificial general intelligence, which basically can do all tasks better than humans. So if we were to take a look at something like chess, where you had Deep Blue, I think, by IBM many years ago, figure out how to beat the chess grandmaster, and then later on you had DeepMind master Go, and so those are not considered artificial general intelligence, because those programs could do a specific skill set.
Yeah.
But with artificial general intelligence, they can do all skill sets. right? And so if they can do all skill sets, if they can beat, chess or Go, I mean, these are probably significantly more challenging than figuring out how to reason like a lawyer. Then it's a matter of time, but before we get there, and I think it will get there. And the question is, how long does that take? That's one question. And then what happens then? And I think that there's some things that we have to think about as lawyers about our practice going forward, that if we want to be prepared for like the next act in this, in artificial intelligence, and we have to start preparing for now.
Yeah, I agree. And as we were joking before we started, this will probably be the beginning of a series of our chats, because we can't tackle this all in just a one podcast episode. But for those who, so as someone who's successfully integrated technology into your practice, what advice would you give to lawyers who are law firm owners, managers that are hesitant or unsure where to start with implementing new tech solutions in their firm? Yeah.
I think that, in a perfect world, everyone could choose any kind of system they want and build on their own. But I know that we don't live in that world. But I would say, practically speaking, the thing that everyone should consider doing is basically making sure that all your data is digital, right? So I know lawyers like to write things on handwritten or keep things, maybe out of their system or whatever. You should put everything digital, because later on that's going to be very important. And there's a certain amount of structure you want to have to your data, and maybe this can be one of your later podcasts. But for starters, make everything go into the computer, because I think in
like squish it in there.
Squish it in there, because that's going to be important. It's not going to be able to. I don't think AGI is going to be able to read your mind.
Well, I mean, there's the Neuralink thing, right? So
yeah, and it's not going to read your chicken scratch. So have it like typed out.
Yeah, nobody can read that. I don't know.
Can't read mine.
Yeah, that's a good starting point. Okay, well, we're coming to an end, and I always love to ask a couple of questions. So, what is your favorite board game or game, and why?
My favorite board game or game? Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be. Monopoly. Is that too cliche?
No, you're only the second person to say that.
But for several reasons. One is because there's strategy involved. So it's not just like a roll of the dice. You actually have to think through. But two, like there's a lot of people who can play, and three, like it can be like a whole night. Like you're like, if you're doing it with your family, like you're together for a long time.
A long time. Yeah.
That's what you want. That's what you want.
This could take forever. And then some people can get really into it. So, but
yeah, I know. You gotta make sure that people aren't, choking one another. But
we sometimes play it digitally on our PS5. I mean, our place, whatever, I don't know. And you can put like a limit and stuff like that. But that's funny. Yeah. I didn't know you'd be a Monopoly guy. So okay, well, the next question, what's your superpower? And tell us a little bit more about it. What do you think your superpower is?
I think my superpower is patience, and it's not in all instances. I don't have unlimited patience with my kids, for example. But I think it comes when if there's something that I'm determined to learn, like I say it's important. Okay, I'll have patience. So going back to the example I was giving earlier, understanding a new computer system, like that it's taken years, to acquire the understanding I have, which, I just attribute it to my patience. I don't know what else it is.
Well, you have a lot of fortitude and determination. I guess it's sort of a combination. I think you're the only person who's mentioned patience as their superpower. So I think my assistant and I need to like keep tabs on everybody's super game, their board game and their superpower, and we'll definitely keep that in mind. Yeah. Well, Jeff, it's been great. And I know this is not the last time we'll have you on. How can people find you and connect and talk more about all the fun things you're up to?
Yeah, I would say mobilepathways.org. That's the nonprofit. And that's where a lot of kind of like the exciting new developments happen. And so if you're interested in seeing like kind of what we're doing, what we're up to, maybe go over there. Certainly happy to entertain any emails that come my way too. Jeffrey@mobilepathways.org.
Awesome. So we talked a lot about leveraging technology, helping service our clients, sort of a little bit of access to justice and that, and how this sort of parlayed itself into a nonprofit and what you're doing in that, and just sort of a little bit about the potential future practice of law and where we think things are going. Do you have any closing thoughts as we conclude today?
Well, I would certainly say, no one, like, we are in the most transformative times of probably like any humans, perhaps.
Wow.
I think we probably are. And so I would say that if you're not at retirement age, which I'm not yet, it's not a time to be complacent, but it's a time to really understand what's going on around you and to try to look ahead. And so I look forward to working with other people who have the same kind of ideas of, what's the, act 2 of this technological revolution we're going through. So yeah, and the most important thing to do is to keep abreast of what's going on and to not become complacent that things will be the way they have been.
Definitely agree. Stay agile, open-minded, keep learning, and be patient. All of the above. Well, thanks so much, Jeff, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this insightful journey today. Your time and engagement has meant the world to us. And if you enjoyed this episode, definitely share it, follow us, like whatever, all that good stuff. Give us a review. And if you want to keep the conversation going, join us at the Power Up Your Practice Facebook group. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Ruby. It was great being here.
Thanks, Jeff. Feeling overwhelmed by admin tasks? You're not alone. Many immigration lawyers are in the same boat. That's where Staffy comes in. Over 90 law firm owners just like you have turned to Staffy for help with legal, administrative, marketing, and client-facing work. Now, Staffy's mission: to help lawyers find balance while growing their firm. With bilingual virtual staff and full HR support, they take the hassle out of a team management and focus on what matters most, your clients and your practice. I've personally benefited from Staffy's support with 7 virtual assistants of my own across various areas of 2 of my businesses, including my law firm. Now, schedule a free initial consultation with Staffy. That's stafi.cc and use the code RUBY. That's RUBY for $500 off. Thank you for tuning in to the Power Up Your Practice Law Practice Management podcast. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. Join us next week for another episode where we'll continue to explore insightful strategies for success. Power Up Your Practice with us. See you next time.